Welcome to Inspired Living with Carrie Murphy, the podcast, where as your host each and every week, I am going to inspire you and empower you to share your message and step into that big vision you see for yourself. I'll be bringing you celebrity interviews, influencer insights, and my personal tips from decades as an on-camera talent, TV host, media expert, and entrepreneur, so you can build a brilliant seven-figure brand. Because when you're inspired, you inspire others. So let's go. This is a question you probably wouldn't think that I would ask. When is the last time you got angry? I think as women, we are conditioned to keep the peace, to shove everything under the rug. And yet sometimes anger can be the greatest catalyst for change. And in this interview today with Dr. Cheryl Wood, she talks about how anger was one of the things that really allowed her to shift into entrepreneurship and how it allowed her to take power over her own life and not wait for someone to give her opportunity. In fact, she said every woman, regardless of race, has a little bit of the angry Black woman inside of her, and that is a great thing. In this interview, she shares with us the 3 actions to take from anger. She talked about growing up in poverty and now becoming an acclaimed international empowerment speaker, how she breathed life into that vision. She's a TEDx speaker and a 13-time best-selling author who has impacted thousands of lives across the globe. She is known for being a catalyst for women, for helping them find their voice and to create their stages online and off. And we went all places in this interview, and I just loved it so much. So get ready, because we're going to stir some things up. We're going to encourage you to get angry, to be inspired, and to live your greatest life. Miss Dr. Cheryl Wood, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
So am I. I told you from the moment I met you, I just loved your energy. We have such a common energy about life and business and getting out into the world, making our mark felt. So I am super excited to be having this conversation today.
Oh, thank you so much. I will. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but energy is such an important aspect of what it is that we create in the world. And Cheryl, like going through your bio, you're so celebrated, you're acclaimed, you're Dr. Cheryl Wood now. And we were just discussing that you had to claim that and have this body of work, and you didn't start there. I think everyone looks at you or might look at someone else and go, oh my gosh, like I don't have those as seen on logos and I haven't been featured in all of these publications, but you didn't start there. So let's go back for a minute. Let's take people back in time to where you started out.
Yeah, I love sharing with people that right now you're looking at my sexy chapter 11.
Right. I'm version Carrie 5.0. Like, I don't know what version at this point.
Exactly. Like you're in chapter 11 of the story. Let's go back to chapters 1 through like 7 and 8, which wasn't so sexy. And the reality is, growing up as a young girl, I grew up in an environment, unfortunately, of poverty, but a lot of love in my household from my mother. She was very strict. She kept us on the straight and narrow path, my sister, myself, and my brother. But it was hard. It was tough living. And every day that I walked out of the high-rise building that we lived in, I witnessed firsthand some of the worst parts of life. I witnessed people who were selling drugs. I witnessed people who were addicted to those drugs. I witnessed young girls who were pregnant at a very young age, people who worked every day and still could not put food on the table for their family. So it wasn't a pretty environment to grow up in. But again, thank God I had that guidance from my mother, who was no nonsense. Yeah. So as I grew up through that environment, for me, the hard thing was when you grow up in that environment of scarcity, everybody's telling you not that you're going to be a giant in the world. They're saying most likely you're going to be another statistic. And I think that's where a lot of the mindset work, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, comes into play for you to move beyond what people expect based on your past and where you grew up at. So I grew up out of that environment. I graduated high school, which that in itself was a feat because there were a lot of kids who I grew up with who didn't make it out at all. I mean, didn't even make it out with their lives. They succumbed to some of the vices that were in that environment. So I grew up, and when I graduated high school, I didn't go off for 4 years of higher learning at a university, a Ivy League university, or even a community college. I went straight from high school into the workforce because from my perspective, it was like, look, I've got to get out of poverty. How do you get out of poverty? I wasn't
You
thinking
get a job.
you get a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a part of that also was connected to, I wanted to pull my mother out of poverty. So I went straight from high school at 18 and I went and I started working. And that consistently working allowed me to go to a place where I was able to land a job as a legal secretary. I was making about $75,000 a year. And look, I felt like I was doing okay.
Right.
Poverty. Nobody else in my family had ever made that amount of money. I was single. I didn't have kids at the time. I was like, I'm good. I don't want to rock the boat. But you know how life goes. Like,
yes, I do.
There is something bigger that all of us are meant to do. Right. Even when you try to run from it and hide from it's gonna tap you on the shoulder. It's gonna keep trying to wake you up to the thing that's supposed to be your calling. And that happened for me really in 2009. I found myself as a wife, a mother of 3, and I just wanted something different. I did not want to just exist in life, which honestly is what I had been doing up until that point. I was accepting what I had met, what happened in my life or what had been revealed in my life in terms of being able to get to where I was, but that wasn't it. That was just the beginning of my story. And in 2009, there was just something in my spirit was like, Cheryl, there's more for you. And you've got to be willing to get uncomfortable so that you can explore what that more really looks like for you. And that kind of was the start of this whole journey into entrepreneurship, getting my foot wet as an entrepreneur to try to figure out what it even looked like and how I could branch out into this new dynamic that I had never explored before.
Yeah, I just really appreciate that story, Cheryl, because I often say, no one's born with the success gene, and we all have the ability to create the vision that we see for ourselves. And it starts off as like this nice tap on the shoulder, and then it's the push. And then usually, well, I'll just speak in my case, it's like the 2x4 hits you upside the head and you're like, okay, I'm doing this now. Fine. I get it. I'm curious, did you ever, being raised in the environment that you were, and I think for so many, our environments are indicative to what we decide to pursue and who we decide to marry and the path that we go down. Did you ever suffer kind of from that tall poppy syndrome where, like you knew maybe that you were destined for something greater, but you just felt friends and people who love you so much, but like you said, we're telling you you're going to be a statistic. And what made you like do something different?
Yeah, I think first of all, for many of us, if we're going to aspire to be something greater than we are, we need a model of that.
Right.
And I wasn't looking around at a whole lot of models in my environment of people who had taken big risks and gone for it and pursued their big dreams. So that made it difficult on top of my own toxic thinking about whether or not I could be a giant in the world. So again, I came from the environment of scarcity that said, oh, you're going to be a statistic, not a giant. Then I moved into a space in corporate that said, oh, you're not going to be a giant. You're not permitted to be a giant because you don't have a piece of paper that says you're good enough to be a giant. So you're going to stay stuck here at this position, at this level, at this amount of money for as long as you work until you retire. So it just was like, it was being hammered in to my thinking that you aren't enough. And I really had to combat that through what I put inside of me, what I poured in, through what I read, through what I allowed myself to see visually as models, which meant I had to step outside of my own immediate circle to really be able to explore women who were doing the things that I even envisioned doing at all, so that I could see that model. I had to pay attention to everything that I listened to and the people who were in my front row. And if any of those things were toxic, I had to give myself permission to divorce the things that didn't serve me well.
Okay, wait. That is just too juicy because I know that there's someone listening right now, Cheryl, that their front row is a little toxic and you had to give yourself permission. How did you do that? Because when they're in the front row, that means that there's usually a pretty tight connection, tight bond. So tell me your process. What did you do there?
For me, it was becoming more protective of what I allowed in terms of, so sometimes your own, let me just say this, sometimes the toxicity in your front row is even in your household. Ooh.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the people who love you the most, but they're so afraid of the risks that you want to take because they want you to be protected.
Right.
So it's not that they're intentionally being toxic, but the words that they're saying and their potential hindrance of you moving forward can be so toxic to you. So like, I'll give an example of even my husband. Love him to life. We've been married 21 years. We still like each other. But when I first started this journey, my husband was like, really? Okay,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? I married a woman who had a job and benefits. Now you're talking about going off and pursuing some career that has no security, no benefits, no insurance, no this, that, and the other. And you ain't even making no money doing it yet.
Right.
So it was like,
I know there's so many women that can relate to that conversation, and men.
It's real. Yeah. And you get it because I changed the game on him, right? Like, we got married with the fact of a reality of, hey, we're both contributing to the finances of this household. Here's what you're bringing to the table. Here's what I'm bringing to the table. And then you up and change the game and you're like, okay, well, I want to do something different. And it has no security. And I got to take a bunch of risks. And I got to spend a bunch of money that I don't really have with hopes that I will get it back. So it's a lot that comes with that whole journey of entrepreneurship. So when someone is in your ear and they don't have the most positive things to say, that does feel like toxicity to someone who wants to move forward and forge ahead. For me, what I did was I stayed prayed up, number one. Number two, I made sure I read books that just were it was like a source of fuel to the fire that was already in my spirit, telling me there was something more. Mm-hmm. And those reading about other women's stories and how they had started from nothing and they had built these empires, and reading books from Lisa Nichols and Les Brown and Tony Robbins and quotes. It was literally like me fortifying my mind for the journey that I was going to be on and protecting my headspace, the toxic thinking of other people, because I had my own toxic thinking about whether or not I was good enough. So I didn't need anybody else's toxic thinking on top of mine.
I don't need anyone else contributing to that conversation.
No, I had that all under control, the whole toxic thinking and, oh, are you good enough? And who's going to listen to you? You're just a girl who came from poverty and like all that stuff.
Yes.
When I tell you that for the first probably 3 years of my business, I struggled with that. Really even believing that I was good enough to be at the front of the room, teaching anybody anything, speaking to anybody about anything. I just questioned it, but it was that consistency of repeating to myself these mantras and affirmations that, Cheryl, you are enough just as you are. And you can continue to build on that. And you can continue to pour more in, but even without anything else, you are enough just as you are. And there's someone somewhere who is waiting on what you're sitting on.
Okay. Got to hold that up for a minute. They are waiting on what you are sitting on. You know, I think that, well, of course, you know, you help women really find their voice and use the stage virtually and hopefully here soon back in person. And I love that we complement each other because I teach the video aspect of that. And yet the conversation that I will say most women, not that men don't have it too, is that I'm not good enough, or the imposter syndrome. And I was doing some research on that, Cheryl, and it was really funny because it was like, there are a litany of celebrities that are very well-known people that suffer from imposter syndrome. And yet people who suffer from that, it's like the people who really are frauds don't suffer from imposter syndrome. Like they don't go, oh my gosh, I'm such a fraud. They just are, right? But the people that really have something valuable to share are the ones that have this internal dialogue that keeps them, you know, and again, what you're sitting on, someone else is waiting on. I love that so much. And it's true. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah. And that's why we have to make our lives. This is what I teach my 3 children, and I preach it every day. And I know they get sick of hearing it, but I always say this one thing in life: always make your life bigger than you. Always make your life bigger than you, because when you go that step above and you make it bigger than you, then you stop questioning, am I good enough? Should I come to the front of the room? Should I come from out of the shadows? Is anybody going to hear me? And you realize, no, someone needs me before they are ever going to take a next step towards their next level in life. Before they even believe that they can move forward, they've got to hear my voice. They've got to hear this message I deliver, the way I deliver it, and knowing that no one can duplicate you. And the
Right.
way that you express your message, the way you express your gift or share your gift with the world, which means there's a segment of the population who's waiting on you. So when you think that way, you get out of your own way. When you start making it bigger than your life and you're like, oh, I've got to show up today. I've got to get up and put my clothes on and get dressed and come and do this summit, this podcast, this conference, this video, whatever the thing is, because someone will not move until I move. It puts you in a whole different space of being willing to show up, even with the thought in the back of your mind that, oh, I might not be good enough.
Right. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I just realized, Cheryl, that we might have been separated at birth. Because I mean, you're saying all the things that I share so much with people is that video is not about you. Your message is not about you. And when we get over ourselves and we show up in a true heart of service, no matter what modality, no matter what social you use, right? There is that person that is going to resonate with your story and your way of being and your solution. And so we need to get out of this copycat marketing place that it just feels so inauthentic and be really unapologetic with who we are. And, you know, Cheryl, when I was watching your TED Talk, congratulations, by the way, that was awesome. You said something that as a middle child growing up in a codependent family really hit me hard. And I know if it hit me hard, it's going to hit someone else hard. And you said that every woman, regardless of race, has a little bit of the angry Black woman inside of her, and that should be a driver, that should be celebrated, right? Not passive, right? Not something that we're ignoring. Now, growing up, I didn't get angry. Everything was always rainbows and lollipops until it wasn't, right? I feel like, especially women, we're taught to keep the peace. We're taught not to, make a ruckus, and at least in my case, kind of put things under the rug. Everything's fine. Everything's great until it's not. And your TED Talk really hit me because I will say from my own experience that when I did take massive action, it was usually out of some sort of anger, or some sort of intense feeling of wanting something different, wanting something to be different in the world, or for women to experience wealth and to do their genius work. And so I just did a branding exercise where the whole team and I came together and we talked about what fires us up. And man, that was a fired up conversation. Get a whole, team of women talking about what fires us up. But it was a different energy that I don't think most of us play in. And if anything, we actually avoid it. I want to hear from you. Where did this come from? Especially as a Black woman, I'm sure that takes some courage to say, because I think there's such a stereotype with that. But in women in general, we're told not to show that emotion. How do you use it to drive you?
Yeah, everything I've accomplished that's been, a major feat, if you will, really has stemmed from me getting angry, so angry about a specific situation that I was in, that anger propelled me to take the action that would give me a new result. There have been times where I was disappointed about something, and it was just disappointment. I did nothing with it. There are times when I was discouraged or sad. Okay. And I just sat and I was discouraged and sad. But oh, baby, when I get angry, you had better watch
out.
So I am about to execute something brilliant in the world to replace what I'm angry about. And that is the thing that I think a lot of women, oftentimes they shield themselves from getting angry because they think of it as this negative emotion only. Oh, getting angry is negative and it's bad and it's toxic. No, it can be one of the most powerful emotions if you allow yourself to take that anger to propel you to creating something to combat whatever it is that you're angry about. So for me, I remember the first time when I was in corporate America and I started this new job, and 2 weeks into the job, the person that I was going to be supporting, I was going to be their legal secretary, wasn't even there, wasn't even in the space, was on travel. And when the person did finally come back from travel and we met kind of face to face, the person didn't want to work with me. And there was no reason for it other than I believe there was some racism there. That's the honest truth. Well, the next thing I know, I'm being pulled into the HR office. And this is after like 13 years of doing what I had done and having a stellar reputation. And I get pulled into the HR office and I'm thinking that they want to commend me on how great I'm handling the situation and praise me. And it was not that. They were there, had pulled me in the office to tell me they were going to have to let me go because it just wasn't working out. 2 weeks There wasn't even a learning curve in 2 weeks. And I remember, I will never forget this. I remember sitting there trying to maintain my dignity as a woman, but the tears started streaming down my face. And when you're in the HR, you don't want them to see you crying, right? You're trying to maintain this tough exterior, but my tears were from an anger and a frustration that I allowed myself to be in a position where someone else controlled my financial status.
Mm-hmm.
And all I could think was, how am I going to pay my mortgage next month? Like, this is all running through my head in a 20-minute conversation in an HR office. Oh my God, what about the kids' daycare? What about my car note? And I'm sitting, and as I'm thinking this, the tears are just, more tears are streaming down. And I remember getting so angry about that I said, I will never, ever be in a position again where someone else will get to dangle a paycheck in front of me and then snatch it away and take away how I take care of my family.
Yes,
that anger propelled me to start my business.
Yes. I got chills. I am flooded, because sometimes we need those things, right? That's going to light a fire under our tuchus and get us to take action on something that we know we're meant to do otherwise. And you know what, Cheryl, if that didn't happen, then you most likely wouldn't have started your business. You wouldn't be, the acclaimed entrepreneur that you are. And
that push, that's that push you talked about earlier.
That push.
Like sometimes you get the little tap, then you get a nudge, but then you get the push. And I feel like that was God's push. Like, okay, I said, what I said was, you're supposed to be out here doing something greater and really creating legacy with your fingerprint. So I did feel like it was the push. You're absolutely right.
He's like, did you not get the download? I sent you the message. What's happening over here? I had a similar experience where after I lost my talent agency and I moved out to Los Angeles, I was doing the audition hustle again. And here I am, after running 2 businesses, I'm in my 30s, and I was in an audition room for 3 hours. And I will never forget that moment. I had tears running down my face as well. And I was pissed that I wasted 3 hours in a swimsuit, surrounded by supermodels. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it was that moment that was just like, I am never going to wait for someone to validate what it is that I want to be doing on the planet. And that started Inspired Living. And I think that if each one of us can harness that anger and use it, and you have like 3 action steps that you recommend that people do when they start feeling this anger. Can you share with us what those are?
Yeah, simply those 3 things are to acknowledge, analyze, and then act. Like, really acknowledge that, okay, I'm angry about something, and pinpoint what that thing is. And then start to analyze, how am I going to, as you mentioned, harness this anger? Like, what am I going to do with it? What is the end goal that I want? What is it that I want to manifest as a result of this? Because if you allow that anger to just stay stored inside, it does become a toxic emotion. So we don't want to store it inside. We want to acknowledge, I'm angry right now, and give ourselves that permission to be in that emotion, and then analyze, what am I so angry about, and what do I want to do with it? And then act. So I always share with everyone, if knowledge is power, then knowledge executed is a superpower. So if you have knowledge about something you're angry about that you want to see changed in the world or in your own life or in the lives in your community, then you've got to take action. So that action step, that is the most critical point, because otherwise you are just an angry woman.
Right. Yes. Then you are exactly that. And you talk about acknowledging, and I feel so many times, Cheryl, when we're triggered by a situation that causes the emotion of anger, it's usually so much deeper than the thing that caused the anger. Like, you losing that job wasn't so much probably about that specific thing, but it was the fact that you allowed yourself, right, to be in a place where you were dependent on someone else for your livelihood, or that you weren't pursuing your own dream, and that here you were in a place now that someone else was dictating that for you.
That's it. The anger is just what rises to the top, but there's always these underlying emotions under it. It's hurt, it's disappointment, it's sadness, it's those things, discouragement, that are at the root of it, the core. But then anger is what rises to the top, and for me, propels me into action. Because again, I can be sad, I can be disappointed, but I can still keep doing the same thing and never change anything about what I'm doing, right? And that's what they say. They say that that's the definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again without any new results. So I can be sad. I've been sad before. I've been disappointed about something. I've been discouraged, and I kept doing the same thing. But when I get angry, like, literally, I am in full force and movement.
Yeah. When I heard you speak, my reaction was really interesting. I went downstairs and I was getting ready for bed. And my thought was, I need to go get angry. Like, I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to think of something that really pisses me off, because it really sunk in that really can be a driver. And I will never forget the plane rides where I was reading this book called Half the Sky. And if you haven't read it, it will bring you to tears, but it also really like ignites anger because of what's happening in the world with the sex trade and all that. But it got me to a place where I was committed to helping solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that we now contribute to organizations and charities that change that statistics and those landscapes. And, being that inspired living so much is about social entrepreneurs, not just doing our genius work, but making enough that we can give it back and make the world a better place. Like, I think our anger and our frustration not only builds our businesses, but it also like can be the heartbeat of what allows us to give back and make a difference too.
Absolutely. If I wasn't angry, I wouldn't be talking to you today. If I wasn't
Yeah.
angry had been angry at some point, I wouldn't be touching hundreds of thousands of women's lives all across the world through the work that I do. So, I'm thankful and grateful that I got angry enough to actually get into movement, consistent movement that would produce results that would not only impact my life and my family's life, but then would be a trickle down effect or a domino effect on the lives of so many other women who are inspired by my work. They're educated and equipped to also go out and get angry and take action and do some things that is going to change the world and create their legacy as well.
I'm just thinking about the ripple effect from this episode. We're going to have angry women all over the world.
We'll be getting DMs from a whole lot of husbands who are, their wives are angry.
What did you guys talk about on Inspired Living today? Oh, that is funny and also very true. So let's fast forward a little bit, Cheryl, because your expertise, and I'm actually so beyond excited to have you as one of the featured speakers at Brilliant this year, which to me, like if you can go back to Christmas as a little girl, and like, that's brilliant to me as an adult. Like, I cannot wait to get everyone together. The excitement, the talk about energy, the transformation that happens when you are surrounded by women that think big, that support big, and that aren't afraid to say, I see big things for my life. And, you really help women find their voice, share their voice. When you were starting out, what were some of the things that you did? Because again, your bio, is so impressive, but what steps did you take early on? Can you share a little bit, like maybe 3 things that you did when you were starting? Because I find that that's usually the most challenging place. I feel like, there's a tipping point that you get this level of momentum, this level of confidence. But the first things that you did when you were starting out in this whole new world of entrepreneurship to get where you are right now.
Yeah, I would say the first thing was simply giving myself permission to validate what I knew at that season. So often we are thinking that we've got to add more on before we start sharing our voice and sharing our experiences and what we know. But there's a power in validating that what you already know right now in this moment is enough for someone, because there's someone who doesn't know as much as you know. And it never ceases to amaze me how women, we will devalue, diminish, and discredit everything that we're sitting on right now in this moment. But for me, I had to learn how to validate every part of my life that I brought into my speaking. So even when I started 10 years ago, I still had experience as a wife, as a mother. I had almost 15 years of corporate experience communicating as a legal secretary, being a liaison between the board of directors and the CEO and the CFO and the support staff. Like, I had all of these great transferable skills, but I was only focused on, well, I'm not a speaker. Okay, but what do you have to pull on that's going to add value as you're mastering the skill set of speaking? So number one, just give yourself permission to validate that what you already have and are sitting on is powerful for someone else's transformation.
Just because you start a new chapter doesn't mean you leave the past experiences. Like, they all go with you. And I find that it's so funny when women start a new business, they discredit their background, their experiences, their credentials, because it's a new chapter, but that doesn't mean you don't bring all the previous chapters with you.
Absolutely. Bring it all. I say I'm
Yeah.
giving all of me to every
Yeah.
season of this journey. The second thing is really to avoid this syndrome of comparing yourself to others. There's a
Gosh,
quote that
yes.
says comparison is the thief of all joy. It will literally rob you of any level of satisfaction and joy you can have. So stop looking at the people who are already 40 steps ahead of you thinking, well, I have to be that before I'm considered a giant in the world or great. That couldn't be farther from the truth. So I have people who I aspire to model myself after them, the Lisa Nichols and Les Browns and Tony Robbins and Eric Thomas and Brian Tracy's of the world. They're the gurus. We love
Yeah.
them.
Yes.
However, everybody's not ready to be trained at that level. Everybody's not prepared to come under that level of tutelage and studentship, if I can call it that.
Yes.
They need what you have based on you. And look, the reality is the further we go up and the more successful we become, honestly, there's a bigger gap to fill in terms of our relatability to everyday women or people or whoever you're serving to say, okay, I can be that.
Yep.
So you are in a beautiful prime space right now where there's this level of relatability where people can say, oh, I've seen you grow, but you're still at a space where I can envision myself growing just like you have. Oh,
Yeah.
wow, you came from poverty and scarcity. You were a legal secretary, but now you're here. Wow, if you can, maybe I can. And
That's
after
right.
all, that's what we all want to do. That's making your life bigger than you when you're able to reach back and inspire someone else to play a little bit bigger because of your own example.
Yes. I love that. And it's so true. It's one of the things that we teach is that you have to show that you're human. Like you might be here in your business, but I'll tell you, if you're a mom, you know that not every day is rainbows and lollipops. And you know that there's in any phase of your business, there is a different level of struggle. There are things that you're dealing with. And that's what allows people to see possibility. It's not you at the top of the mountain with all the accolades and all the, the awards. It really is you showing us, hey, I took this step, you can take it too.
That's it. And transferring those lessons back to the people who are going to be hearing your voice. And then I think the
1,000%.
third step is just to have there's this little 3-part formula that I kind of have on rinse and repeat. And that 3-part formula is show up, speak up, and follow up. And you've got to do that so consistently that there's an expectation that you're going to do the 3. So show up. That's for some people the hardest part because they create all these excuses about why they're not showing up,
right,
to share their voice, to stand in power, to start the business, to start speaking. So first of all, give yourself permission to show up. Once you show up though, you can't just be the best kept secret in the room. You've got to speak up and share with people what your big dream is. For me, one of the things I started doing after that first speaking engagement, which was September 18th, 2010 at Morgan State University, my very first speaking engagement, the first thing I started doing was going to these networking events afterwards. And I would introduce myself from that moment forward as Cheryl Wood. I wasn't Dr. Cheryl Wood. I'm like, I'm Cheryl Wood, international motivational speaker. I had never left Baltimore. I had never left
like,
Baltimore.
I am believing this in. Yes.
Like I am speaking life into what I want to manifest. Zig Ziglar has this beautiful quote that you've got to see the reaching in your own mind to reach a goal before you ever get to the manifestation of the goal. So for me, I was visualizing it and thinking about it and imagining what it would be like to be able to realistically introduce myself as that. And guess what? Today, I am really Dr. Cheryl Wood, an international empowerment speaker. So it really is showing up and then speaking up, introducing yourself to people, developing relationships, letting people know what your big dream is. Don't hold that to yourself. Share with people what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, because when they see your energy and your passion and your drive for it, which should come organically because you love it, they're going to want to help you. Not everybody's going to want to help you, but they're going to be some people who are divinely going to be sent to you to be able to open doors that you can't open on your own.
Right.
So you've got to
so
speak up
true.
so people know,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then follow up. And that's where all your power is in the follow-up. The initial introductions and, relationships, that's great. But did you follow up to nurture the relationship, to nurture the opportunity? Did you follow up after the speaking engagement that you did get to thank that person and demonstrate gratitude, and then ask for what it is that you want? You have not because you ask not. So did you ask that person?
Okay, wait. You said that so fast. I just want to go back. You have not because you've asked not.
You have not because you ask not. So if you don't ask, you cannot even ever be in a place of expectation that
you can't receive. Yeah.
You cannot receive.
Yeah.
So for me, if someone has booked me to come and speak, even if it wasn't a paid speaking engagement when I first started. Okay, you couldn't pay me monetarily, but you know how you can create this as a win-win for me? Do you have 3 other organizations you think I might be phenomenal for? Would you be willing to make an introduction to 3 other decision makers who might be able to find value in my message and hire me? So it's asking, and some of the asks, you're going to get a no. Some of the asks, you're going to get a powerful, resounding yes, but it's your job to follow up and make the ask.
You know, I think in this world where it's a digital space and we're creating all these, I don't want to say false connections, but they're not real authentic connections on social. Like we forget about the engagement and the follow-up. And I don't care where you are and in what phase of business, relationships will still be the driver. And this is such a great example, right? I reached out to you to speak at Brilliant. You then reached out to me to speak at your summit. And then it was like, let's get you on my podcast. Let's get you on mine. Like, it's really amazing what happens when you align yourself, with the right energy, with the right people, and you build relationships with those people. And you can go back and, say, hey, it's been a while, but I love what you're doing. How can I support you? Or, how can we collaborate together? I think collaboration is a really powerful word right now because so many of us are working at home by ourselves for ourselves and we feel deflated and sometimes defeated. But when you have this energy, like I can feel right now with you, Cheryl, like there's nothing that can take that away. Like there's nothing that you can duplicate for that. And I think it's really important to remember, to show up, to speak up and to follow up. You can't just like something or make one comment or pitch yourself once to the media,
and be good to people.
Yeah.
Even when what you want perhaps doesn't manifest immediately.
Right.
Because our relationship just didn't happen overnight. We had a really good mutual energy when we first connected, we first met. We followed each other on social media. We hadn't talked in years, but except to maybe click like on each other's posts a few times. And I'm like, oh, she has a new baby. And every time I would see your name, I'm like, oh, I love Carrie, right? But we treated each other so well in our initial engagement that it just built this sort of camaraderie that would expand over years until we did get the opportunity now to work together. So be good to people, be kind to people. Don't just go in for what you can get in the immediate, because that thing might not come until 4 years down the road. My relationship that I have now, developing now with Les Brown, that's 8 years in the making. Now I talk to Les probably 2 times, 3 times a day on the phone.
Yeah.
But that
such
wasn't
a great guy.
That wasn't an overnight thing. So have patience as well with your journey. Have patience with the relationships that you want to nurture and understand that if it is worth it, then stick with it.
Yep. And you said something early on that, growing up the way that you did, you had to go find the models that you could emulate and that you had that inspired you really. And I think for everyone right now, regardless of where you're at, it's like find those people, and whether it is on social or LinkedIn or it's on their podcast, like get in their community. Right? Because it's amazing what happens when you join someone's community and then relationships start happening and these amazing synergies start taking place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And a big part of that also is give before you ask.
Yes.
Like go in giving something. Don't come with your hands open and you just want to take. Bring something to the table, add value. One of the relationships I love the most is a relationship I have with Mickey Taylor. She's the editor at large of Essence magazine. And that relationship we were able to embark upon a relationship because we met at a speaking engagement. I'd never met her before. She'd never met me before, but she got to hear me speak there. I got to hear her speak. We exchanged information. I followed up. And every time I could, I tried to give something to her. When I knew she had a new book coming out, I said, hey, I can bring you here to the DMV and I can do a book signing for you with probably 100 women in the room. Would you like that? I'll cover your travel. I'll cover your expenses. I want to give first before I ever am in any space of expectation that I'm going to get something out of that. And I believe when you function from that space, heart-centered space, really wanting to help other women, it's always going to come back and the blessings are going to chase you down. You won't be able to run from it.
The blessings are going to chase you down. I just love that so much. We really believe that you get what you give. And you're such a beautiful example of that, Cheryl. And I could talk to you for hours. I so appreciate you. I want everyone to go out there and get angry. And I want you to show up, speak up, and follow up. Be consistent. Don't wait for someone to give you permission, but if you're in that place that you're waiting for it, Cheryl, are we giving it to him? Can we give it to him today?
We're giving it to you right now. We're confirming it right now that you have everything that it takes. You are enough just as you are. Get started.
That's right. All right, Cheryl, tell me what inspired living means to you.
Oh, great question. Inspired living. Inspired living means creating this lifestyle that I am absolutely in love with, but that does not just serve me. It serves someone else even more than it serves me.
I love that. And how can someone get in touch with you? If someone wants to learn how to work with you and how to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You can go directly to my website, CherylEmpowers.com, and definitely connect with me all across social media at Cheryl Empowers. I hang out on Clubhouse and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, all the places that you normally would find anyone who's doing anything major in the world. You can find me there, because that's my goal, is to do major things for as many people as I can in the world. So at Cheryl Empowers on social media.
I am with you, my sister friend, and just so grateful for our time together. So excited to have you at Brilliant this year. If you want to join us, please go to thebrilliantevent.com. It is September 12th through the 14th. We're going to have limited in-person availability. So if you want to get up and get into a room with just palpable energy and possibility, then be one of the few that can join us live. We will have virtual tickets available as well. And Cheryl, I can't wait for all that you're going to share during that time as well. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you and your light and your strength and the love that emulates through everything that you do. And I just so appreciate this time that we've had together. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Keep being amazing in the world. I love you, sis.
Mwah. You've just heard another uplifting episode of Inspired Living with Carrie Murphy, the podcast. I hope you loved it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you'd like to know more about Inspired Living or to get your hands on many of our awesome free resources, such as the Be Studio Ready Guide, simply visit us at inspiredliving.tv/podcast. Remember, your vision is your destiny, and we're here to help you bring it to life. Join me again next week for another extraordinary episode.